Good evening, and welcome to our latest in conversation, which is going to be the last of 2021. We're having a little break for Christmas, and I'm delighted to be joined by author Nydia, correct? Hetherington. These events are free, but if you'd like to donate to Libraries Unlimited, the charity that runs the 54 libraries in Devon and Torbay, there is a link in the chat. We are also streaming to over 30 libraries this evening, so hello to everybody watching across Devon and Torbay. And if you'd like to ask Nydia a question, please pop in the chat and I will ask her. So originally from Leeds, Nydia moved to London in her 20s to embark on an acting career. Later, she moved to Paris, where she studied at the Jacques Lecoq's theatre school before creating her own theatre company. And when she returned to London, she completed a creative writing degree at Birkbeck. So this is the bit that I've been practicing all day. So this is the story of the greatest funambulist who ever lived. Born into a post-war circus family, our nameless star was unwanted, forgotten and abandoned in the shadows of the big top until the bright light of Serendipity Wilson threw her into focus. Now an adult and haunted by an incident in which a child was lost from the circus, our narrator, a tightrope artiste, weaves together her spellbinding tales of circus legends, earthy magic, folklore, all in the hope of finding the child. But will her story be enough to bring the pair together again? So hi Nydia, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And would you like to tell us about A Girl Made of Air in your own words?
Oh, I'll have a go. Hello, it's lovely to be here with you. So Girl Made of Air is basically about it's somebody's life from birth right through to the moment she's telling the story in middle age. So we're looking back on a whole lifetime. So she's born just at the end of the Second World War in a flea pit circus, and she's unwanted by her mother. So she roams feral around the circus. She is taken under the wing of the circus funambulist, the tightrope walker, who is a rather magical person from the Isle of Man. And she teaches her the art of funambulism, and also tries to teach her a little bit about life through telling her folklore stories, myths from her island home, from the Isle of Man, to teach her about how to navigate her way through the world. She happens to grow up being a very talented tightrope walker, our nameless narrator. But something goes wrong and a child goes missing from the circus at some point, and all goes horribly wrong. And our nameless funambulist decides to spend the rest of her life looking for this child. And that's the rest of the story. And it takes her to New York, it takes her to Coney Island, and to stardom to a certain extent.
Yeah.
In New York, and we meet her in the 1980s, well, beginning of the 90s, and she's sat telling a journalist about her life through way of stories. She tells her story through stories, and really that's what this book is about. It's about stories, how we tell them, how we receive stories about our own history and about who we are, and how that molds our own personalities, and how then we sort of navigate through those and regurgitate them in our own way and tell them in our own way. And then it's also about how you receive stories, how we receive stories as readers, as watchers. So it's all about storytelling and stories, really. So that's a really long-winded way.
No, that's fantastic. Good. I think I've read lots of reviews, and I've got lots of friends who are bloggers who've read it, and Emma asked me to pass on how completely mesmerizing and beautiful this book is, and it's one of those books that you sit down, and I said to you just before we came on that I'm nearly at the end and I don't want to finish it because it's so good, it's so engrossing. So what inspired you to write this, beautiful and sometimes dark and sad story, but you know, there is, like you said, hope as well.
So when I decided to write a novel, I kind of decided to just throw myself into it. So I started to do, I started writing short stories, and then I did a degree in creative writing. And I said, oh, no, short stories, no, I'm just going to write a novel. So the first port of call for me were fairy stories, particularly sort of Manx folklore and things like that, because although in my bio it says that I'm originally from Leeds, I grew up in Leeds, but in fact I was born on Merseyside, and we moved to the Isle of Man when I was a baby, and I lived on the island until I was 5 years old. So my very, very early memories of this life, of being alive, are of the Manx landscape.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly are of the stories, which I was really obsessed with. I have very, very vivid memories of my early childhood, which is very strange because I have very few memories at all of anything that happened to me being a teenager. But I have extremely vivid memories of being a child, a very small child.
Mm.
And one of the big things when I lived on the Isle of Man was the fairies. And I was obsessed by them. The fairies on the Isle of Man are cheeky little chappies who wear red hats and do lots of mischievous things. And you have to say hello to them when you go over the fairy bridge where they live. So Evi Vonny Veg, which is Manx for hello little people. Otherwise, they'll do some to you. And so they're not the little Tinkerbell things.
No.
I loved them and I was obsessed by them. So when I came to write, I naturally went into that world. So I knew there would be a character from the Isle of Man who would tell these stories. The circus, well, this is, so the whole idea of being in a circus comes from when I lived in Paris. I lived down the road from a tiny little theatre in the 18th arrondissement. And I lived there for a long time. I lived there for 10 years. And there's a tiny little theatre up near where I lived called Le Funambule. And it had like a beautifully painted, like sort of red and white striped outside, but very faded, with a tightrope walker on it. And I just thought, Le Funambule, what a beautiful word. And I just wanted to use that word, the funambulist, and create a story around it. Plus, of course, I trained in physical theatre, and I trained at the Lecoq School, so that's a physical theatre school. So I worked a lot under canvas, in tents and things, with circus performers. I'm not a circus performer, I never have been, but I'm a trained clown, so there are sort of crossover points. And so I knew a little bit about that world anyway, plus obsession about circuses, which I think most kids go through at some point, I think.
Yeah.
And also I really wanted to write an outsider story, so the story of the outsider, because, you know, I think most people feel like they are the outsider, don't they, especially when they're growing up. I know I always did, and I know that when I talk to people, they see themselves always as I was the outsider. We all feel like the outsider. So basically, as a debut novelist, never written a novel before in my life, as you can see, I just threw everything at it. I threw everything that I had. I was like, right, throwing all this, throwing it all at it and seeing what sticks, and then knitting it. I mean, a lot of it was knitting together the stories, this idea of storytelling and stories upon layers of stories. So a lot of the work was to do with knitting together these layers of stories, and then making sure that they could be peeled away as well.
Yeah. So it's quite dense, isn't it? You know, there's a lot in it. It does, as I said, about like not wanting to race through it. And actually I've got a copy here because I want to show it, because not only is it a beautifully written book, it has the most beautiful cover. It is just a delight. I think it's one of my favorite covers this year, because it is just so beautiful. Did you so you talked about the protagonist being nameless, and that's quite an interesting was that sort of a conscious decision not to name her?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
it's absolutely a conscious decision. There's absolutely a reason for it, and it's not a secret. I don't mind if, as the reader is reading the book, I don't mind if they decide for themselves what their reason is. But there's absolutely a reason that she doesn't have a name. You were talking earlier about it being there's a lot of darkness in this novel, and there is. And I like writing about the dark side of life simply because there's we all have it. There's a lot of it, and historically, I mean, look at the times we're living in. There's a lot of darkness, and I think you can really channel into sort of being fiercely human in writing when you touch the darkness, as long as it's not overwhelming, as long as there's all the light. As William Blake says, everything has its contrary, and so if you write in contraries, I think it is the most touching way of writing and reading. My favorite sort of novels, my favorite fiction is like that, like Angela Carter does that really well, but she's ferocious though, beautiful, ferocious. So anyway, so she doesn't have a name, and she doesn't have a name because, and this is very dark, she's not wanted. She's abandoned at birth. Why on earth would they give her a name? She just doesn't. Nobody gives her a name, so she doesn't have a name.
So her sort of the lady, the woman that looks after her, Serendipity, who becomes her sort of almost like surrogate mother, but also her sort of mentor as well, isn't it? She sort of takes over the parentage of her, because, as you said, her parents aren't interested in her at all. Her mother Marina, who I sort of was really intrigued by, this sort of mermaid-esque figure who swims with the crocodiles, but also likes her gin. And then her dad, is it Manu, the dad? Yeah, who's the lion tamer. And the characters that you've got, I mean, there's some fantastic female characters. You've got Big Jen, who's almost like the grandmothery sort of figure, and Serendipity again and then Marina the mother. Those sort of characters are big in themselves, aren't they? Was it a challenge to sort of be able to have their story coming through as well as our unknown protagonist?
To be honest, they were very easy to write. I wouldn't have been able to create a world without having their stories so involved in the world, because they're so important to her life. I mean, it's all about matriarchs. I mean, whether they're real sort of mothers or mothers of adoption, or like Big Jen, the mother of the circus.
Yeah.
It's all about sort of matriarchal figures, and how girls and women navigate those relationships, and that's something I really wanted to explore with the book. But I don't think I could have written it without their stories sort of filtering through. So no, it wasn't hard to do, quite the contrary. It made it easier to write the book, have their characters, because they help the book move along.
They do, yeah.
So it wasn't hard. It actually made the writing easier and a lot more fun as well.
I imagine they were fun characters to write, because they are big and larger than life, aren't they? And they sort of, and the circus itself, I do love a circus setting. As I said before we were talking about sort of night circus, but this one was, it was a bit shabbier than that sort of, it's not, I mean, there is magical bits, but it's a bit grubbier, isn't it, than you can almost smell these sort of animals, and that she, I thought it was very immersive and colourful in very different ways. So was that fun? Sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I wanted you to be able to see the mud and to smell the mud. And that grass, I don't know. And when I was young, we used to go camping with the school and we had these terrible bell tents, and all you could smell was the absolute
I
filth,
know, yeah.
grass and dirt and grime underneath it, and you just stank of it, you know. And you don't know if you'd like got dog poo under there or it always stank. And that was the kind of smell that I had in mind for their encampment. Whenever they found an encampment, imagine that smell along with the privies and everything else. Because also, having been a performer for most of my life, you know, what you see on stage, no matter what that stage may be, because I don't mean just a proscenium arch theatre, because I worked in many different types of you know, venues and theatre situations, but what you see as the spectacle, the backstage is an absolute hole usually. So it's just the whole thing of, you know, like Wizard of Oz, you know, they're pulling the
curtain back and there being some little man behind there, but that's what it's, you know, when you go in, I love that. I thought it made it so real, that sort of, you know, because it wasn't, and I think it sort of it definitely sort of weaved together with the characters as well, because they're colourful and a bit grubby, and you know, they've all got their, so it just made the story for me. I loved that side of it. I loved being sort of immersed in that sort of quite grubby circus world.
And also the other thing is I wanted to also show that they're poor.
Yeah.
Poor. They, you know, they don't have anything. They're living, you know, they're great artists. I mean, they're creating these beautiful spectacles of, you know, they're acrobats, they're dancers, they're lion tamers, they're tightrope walkers, these great, amazing artists. It takes, you know, a lifetime. You have to you really have to start training at the age of 4 to be able to, you know, be a brilliant circus performer. It's like being a ballerina, you know.
It's like a life, isn't it? It's a life choice. It's
absolutely. And yet they're poor, they have nothing. They travel from town to town, they live on the seat of their pants, they're grubbing around for food, you know.
So again, it's like you said about like that sort of gloss, isn't it? As the circus, like on the outside, it's all like the big top and the red coat and the, you know, the big spectacular show. But then afterwards, it's, you know, back to trying to find something to eat and living in, you know, not very nice conditions. And
she's on your red coat as well. So in the patches, you can't see it under the lights, but you know, the splits in the costume, you know.
Did the characters develop as you wrote the book? Did they sort of, when you sort of started off with the idea of did you start off with the idea of your protagonist first, or was there other characters, or did it sort of change as you went along?
So the first thing I wrote was, so I wrote it in two, when I started writing, there's two kind of almost starts, so two false starts really, and I didn't know which one to start with. So I started with the life and origins of Serendipity Wilson, so about how she was found rather than born on the Isle of Man, and brought up by her adoptive parents as well. And I wrote that on a double-decker bus going to Brixton in South London, in a traffic jam which lasted 2 hours, and I just had I went literally down a road which I could have walked in about 5 seconds in about 2 hours, and I wrote it in a notebook that I just happened to have in my bag, and I just wrote it, and I thought, well, I'm just gonna have to check all this folklore stuff I'm putting in here. I'll have to check it when I get home. When I got home, I checked it and it all worked, surprisingly, and I was like, wow, this is great, it checks out. So there was that. So Serendipity Wilson, with her magical hair and her folklore origins, was very much at the genesis of the novel. And then I wrote the bit which is now at the beginning of the book, chapter 1, which is the conversation between the narrator of the book and the journalist. Originally, I did it just as a kind of story, so it wasn't a conversation.
Yeah.
And I wrote, so it was about her mother, Marina, with the crocodiles and the whole circus, and her being, you know, taught by Serendipity Wilson. So, but that was just like, it was almost like a standalone little thing on its own.
Yeah.
And then, so these two things were my sort of jumping off points. And then from there, you just sort of, like I say, it's a jumping off point. So from there, if it's a dive, they're your diving boards, you just kind of start to swim,
Yeah.
you know, and see where it takes you. And then eventually I went back and had to think about what I could do with this idea of sort of writing stories down. So the idea is she needs to write everything, whether it be from her notebooks or little things she scribbled down, or her memories or letters. She needs to write them on clean pieces of paper. She needs to write them out herself. And my idea is that she's almost laundering everything on these clean sheets of paper. So then I just wondered how I could tie all that in with who is she talking to, and how can I bring that in a kind of loop, and that's how it ended up being a sort of letter in the end.
Yeah, she it's, you know, the writing was amazing, and I just, like I said, I wanted to savor it. The research, how did you research it? Because you said you come from a theatre background, and you were trained as a clown, but did you go visit circuses, or did you partake in any activities?
Oh, if only. So I did go to the circus, and I went to a couple actually, and it absolutely, one was really typical small big top in a park, you know, that they
Like
do
the traveling ones, yeah.
Which is the circuses I remember as a kid. Jerry Cottle's circus was the one I used to go to as a kid. So that was typical, but it was so interesting, you know, because it's like a small version of a big top, and that's, you could really smell that grassy, dirty thing.
Yeah.
So that was great for that. And then I saw some more, much more sort of beautiful at the not at the Barbican, at the Royal Festival Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Those are absolutely beautiful sort of circus performers there. But I've seen a lot of circus performers in my time, because like I said, coming from a physical theatre background, there's a big crossover there, and I've worked with and seen some amazing performers, so that wasn't far away. And the tightrope, so I've never been on a high wire, but I have walked a tightrope, well, a wire. I've walked but it was about 3 feet off the ground, and it was a theatre festival I did when I just outside Paris many years ago. My company was doing this big festival, lots of other people were doing, and they were doing these, there was circus performance there, and they were doing these like who wants to walk the wire thing. So I have walked the wire and know what it feels like under your feet. I have done that. And then I did do loads of research for circus actually, like right back to Philip Astley, the first ever circus on London Bridge. So I just got loads of books and just read lots, because I was interested in the circus aesthetic. So where does this like circus aesthetic come from? You know, the coat, the red coat, because Philip Astley was basically he was in the army, and he had his like red coat, and the circus, he was on a horse, so it was, that's where the red coat, the ringmaster, that's why he has a whip.
Right.
Circus was all, circus means like circle, and it was just horses galloping and then doing tricks.
Yeah.
It was actually Philip Astley's wife who was the star of the show. It's always the woman, so star of the show, because she was the one who started to do proper tricks, like dangerous tricks on the horses, and that's where our modern day circus comes from. Obviously lots of other things. So I did loads of research about circuses, but that didn't actually go into the book really. It didn't really go into the novel, but it was good for me to immerse myself in that world, in that aesthetic. And as for the folklore stuff, it's been such an sort of fairy tales and folklore have been such an obsession of mine for so long. A lot of my theatre work that I did was based on that kind of stuff, so that was easy. Manx stuff was easy enough for me because I knew a few, and I've got loads of books. And so the tales told by Serendipity Wilson are these little Manx folklore tales that she tells to the protagonist, which she calls a mouse, a narrator. As sort of life lessons, as little stories. They are all real folklore, based on real folklore stories. Some of them, so they were told verbatim to a Manx woman called Sophia Morrison. So she went round in the late 1800s and spoke to old Manx men and said, tell me about the fairies, tell me about the, about the Bugain, tell me about all these different, Manx legendary creatures. And she wrote verbatim down what they said. And you can buy these collections of these tales, and some of them are just 2 lines long. So it gives you a lot of space to tell them. Some of them are just like, and so they planted a tramon tree in their back garden because that's where the fairies of the dead lived and they wanted to be protected, and that's why they did it. And that's the story. So then you can take that and you can just completely sort of run with it and write around it and write with it.
Because it was your debut novel, and when I was looking at my research for tonight, I was looking at the classifications on the genre, and it crosses quite a lot, doesn't it? So you've got your historical, you've got your magical realism, you've got your folklore, you've got so was it difficult to pitch that, and how difficult was it for you to get published for that genre, or that collective genre, I should say?
Difficult. So the thing is publishing do like things to be tied up. You can understand it, they've got to sell these things, and like I said earlier, I find it very hard to tell you what my book is in one sentence, but actually publishers love it if you can, because that really helps. You can get them one sentence like that, perfect. And of course I couldn't do that, so I mean, people, first of all, you've got to get an agent. So it's hard. So you send off to lots of people, you get lots of rejections, you get I had lots of what I call near misses. So they say, absolutely loved it, and they give you loads of feedback, but have you got anything else to send me? Got lots of that. I just can't take it at the moment, blah blah blah. And then I got my amazing agent, who basically was just like, I want this, and
that's the one you want.
Yeah, well, exactly. So rather than exactly. So when somebody tells you passionately that they love your work, they're going to be your champion, and she's been the best champion ever. So then we did a little work on the book together, myself and my agent, sort of a few structural edits, because like you said, you need to be able to sell it to the publisher, especially when there's so many, it's so crossy, it crosses so many genres. So we did some structural edits to make it I suppose tighter, and then it went on submission, and it got lots of rejections. What can I say? I stopped counting at 27.
Oh no.
So but then it landed, and hurrah, and lots of lovely things have happened. So it's been optioned for television as well, which is fantastic.
I really could see that. And I think quite often you know, it is a long slog for people. It's not a, you know, it's not an overnight. It's very rare that people get an overnight, you know, oh yeah, you write this book and it's fantastic. And, you know, people are very, very lucky if that happens. And, you know, we hear a lot more stories like yours where it's been 20, 30 rejections before you find that one. And I really like the fact that it's got lots of, because lots of the genres that it crosses over I like. So actually it's almost like, you know, buy one get 5 free sort of thing. Get it all into one. And I like that. I like to be challenged when I'm reading. So it's nice to not know what's coming, because you don't know what bit's going to come next, whether it's going to be historical, whether it's going to be about a fairy, whether it's going to be about a mermaid. Yeah, I like that. So with your sort of debut, so that was your debut, and that came out, was it in 2019?
No, it came in the dreaded 2020.
It was in the dreaded 2020. Yeah, I couldn't remember. I knew it came out in paperback recently, didn't it? So, but yeah, so it did. The hardback came out in the dreaded 2020.
It came out on Super Thursday when 600 other books came out.
Oh, was it that September? In September? Oh, I remember that date. Yeah. So yeah. was that a challenge as well? Because obviously, you know, it was really hard anyway to get a book out on that day when you've got that many books coming out, but also, you know, the limits of being able to go and do real life events and things like that. Has it been more difficult, do you think, for you because of that?
Oh, it's been really hard. I mean, it's been hard for me personally because I have what they call underlying health problems. I have an autoimmune condition, and I'm on immune suppressant medication, and so I've done the whole. I mean, I've hardly been out of the house really for 2 years, I'll be honest. So I couldn't do events at all, you know, that weren't sort of online, and also when my book came out in hardback, people weren't used to doing online events. It was very, very new, so people didn't really know how to do it.
No.
And so just a lot of things got cancelled, you know, so a lot of stuff got cancelled. So it was nothing like how, you know, it's amazing you get your publishing deal and lots of amazing things happen and you're really looking forward to the book coming out, and then this pandemic has changed everything. And it wasn't at all what I mean life is so different now, you know, and so it wasn't at all what I imagined it would be. And I think everybody whose debut came out in 2020,
yeah, it was really tough. It was really, really tough.
Yeah, so yeah, it was hard, but you know, I'm really proud of this book, and I'm really proud of what Quercus did with it.
Yeah,
beautiful. But I mean, even the hardback and the paperback are both beautiful. This is
they are.
Hardback version.
Yeah, the hardback is really beautiful. Did it have the nice edges on it? Did you have, like, you know?
No, it hasn't got any sprayed edges, but
yeah,
beautiful.
That gold.
Yeah, and they did. Oh, they were amazing, and I just felt that, you know, even you can't help. You can't change the way the world is. You can't change the topic, unfortunately. If only we could. And I was very lucky, really, to you know, I've got my book published. It's in hardback. It's in paperback. I had a brilliant team behind me. It was just sad that I couldn't go into bookshops and do all that kind of stuff, but it is what it is. You know?
Maybe, well, we can only ever hope that things will get better, and that, you know, maybe, and that leads me nicely into maybe the next book. So are you writing at the moment, or can you tell us anything about it?
I am writing, so I'm just doing a rewrite, so the novel that I'm writing at the moment, getting it ready to show to my publisher. So yeah, I am, and it's been taking me a while to write this book too, so it's probably about 3 years now since I started writing it. But then when the pandemic hit, because I was kind of shielding and everything, and I was one of those people who just froze and couldn't do anything. I know some people say that they were really prolific and did loads of writing or whatever, but I was the opposite. I just couldn't do anything. I couldn't focus, you know, like complete brain fog, complete, like I can't focus on anything for almost 12 months probably. So in that 3 years, I probably for about 12 months didn't write anything. I stepped away from it.
Yeah.
But I come back to it, and I'm really I've fallen back in love with it, very much so. And so I'm just trying to get it ready now. I only had a 1-book deal with A Girl Made of Air, so I'm writing out of contract, which is a bit scary in a way, but because it means that, you know, you kind of have to hope that it'll be published. But the other thing is you've got no time constraints, because there's no way I would have been able to allow myself to have the, you know, almost 3 years that I've had to write the thing that I'm writing. So so I'm glad I didn't have that time constraint. Certainly with the whole brain fog of the last, you know, not being able to write, that would have been awful, you know, if you had a deadline. Luckily for me, I didn't have that deadline. So the book that I'm writing is it's based in the year 1999, just at the turn of the millennium, and it's, I don't want to say too much, it's based on something that happened to William Blake when he was 8 years old, and he saw angels in an oak tree on Peckham Rye. And that's the basis for the whole story, but it takes place in 1999.
Interesting. So I think that's the thing, isn't it? You said about the second book, and quite often people, that pressure of the second book is because you don't have that freedom with the first one. So I guess in a way it's been great in a way that you've had that sort of time to be able to develop and think and not feel like you're sort of up against it to get the second book out, because I guess that takes the sort of fun out of it as well a bit, as if you've got that pressure and I guess the sort of creativity as well, because it almost becomes more like a job that you're having to sort of get it out. And I understand that is definitely a thing.
Yeah, well, definitely. No, I guess at the same time, I kind of like deadlines because, you know, it's something to head towards. Whereas, you know, it took me like it took me 8 years to write A Girl Made of Air. And again, it's because you have that time. You have that time, and so, you know, so you take that time, because, you know, I'm such with my writing, not with anything else, but certainly with my writing, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I can't sort of let a bad sentence go, you know, which is why it takes me ages to write things, but which is why it is good to have deadlines as well. In the end, you just have to say, look, I just need to just move on now, you know, stop looking at this same sentence it for 4 hours, move on. You know,
you don't tend to edit, you tend to edit as you go rather than sort of just bang it out and then like change it afterwards. You do it as you go.
I do it as I go, and then I rewrite it 1,050,000 so you know, yeah, I can't just bang it out. I can't. And I think I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I'm not confident enough in my own writing, and so if I read a sentence that I don't like, and even if it's, you know, it doesn't look good on the page, or the syntax isn't good, or the imagery isn't good, I hate myself. And I'm like, I hate myself, I'm rubbish, I'm terrible, I can't do it, I'm rubbish, look how terrible I am. So I have to make the sentence as good as I can make it. Of course, then I'll go back and read it and think it's rubbish again and change it again. But I can't just knock it out and just say, well, I've got the story down now. And I don't know if it's to do with confidence or not, but I guess everybody has their process, don't they? And I guess
definitely, and lots of people, and everybody has a different one, and I think it's like what works for you, isn't it, really? I've got some, because we're nearly at the end, and I've got some comments from the audience. So I'll read them out to you. So we've got hello from Ruth from London, and Carol Wright, who says she was your friend from school. She said that it's a lovely book, and she said it's definitely one for Christmas, and I definitely agree with that. Sue from Manchester, and Tracy says we tell stories in order to live, not long-winded, but it's an awesome book.
Oh, thank you. Oh, lovely.
Lots of nice comments. Just before we finish, I wondered if there's anything that you've read recently that you would recommend to our watchers.
It really is. It's not out yet. It is going to be out in February next year, so a couple of months to go yet, but I absolutely recommend Devotion by Hannah Kent. This is a proof copy that I was really lucky to get, because Hannah Kent is one of my favorite authors. She's Australian. She wrote The Good People and Burial Rites, if you've ever...
That was it, yeah, Burial Rites. I knew I recognized her name, but I couldn't think.
Amazingly, I mean, I am in awe of her writing. She is so good, and she writes about very dark things, but she writes beautifully, and that is, you know, that's really very much my bag. I really like that. That really you know, moves me. Her writing is so moving, and her new book Devotion is less dark. If you know her other two books, it's less dark than the other two, but it is full of humanity and beauty, and the way she talks about nature and the human relationship to the natural world, and it's about immigration, and it's about love, and it's about lesbian love, and it's about love between families, and it's historical, and it's so beautifully written.
You've definitely given it a good recommendation there. I think everybody will be wanting to pick that one up. Thank you so much, Nydia. It's been amazing to speak to you this evening. And A Girl Made of Air is out now, and you can order from our friends at the Bookery, or you can order for your copy from either Devon or Torbay libraries via our website. And yes, definitely a lovely book to curl up with on these long winter nights, because it's definitely kept me entertained, and I will be finishing my copy in either today or tomorrow. So thank you so much for joining us. Our next In Conversation won't be until 2022, which sounds very scary. On the 15th of January, we'll be talking to author Amy Taylor about her book, The Big Book of LGBTQ plus Activities. And that is here on Facebook Live on Saturday, the 15th of January at 11 AM. So if you can join us then, thank you so much again, Nydia, for joining us this evening. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I can't wait to find out, to see what comes next for you, and also to finish this one. So thank you. Thank you to everybody for watching.